2 weeks after my sister-in-law told us she was finally pregnant, I found a parking receipt from a motel off Route 9 stuffed in my husband's gym bag. Dated the same week she said she'd been having early cramping. I almost didn't think anything of it. People stop at weird places. Then my father texted me that night, completely unprompted, and wrote, "Whatever you find out, just remember Caleb still needs a father." I sat on the edge of my bed holding my phone for a long time. Because my father doesn't text like that. My father barely texts at all. That was the moment I understood. My parents already knew something I didn't. My name is Renee Whitfield, I'm 31, and before that night I genuinely believed. I knew what disappointment felt like. I thought disappointment was watching my husband forget our anniversary because his brother needed a ride to the airport. I thought disappointment was sitting through another Thanksgiving where my mother praised my brother-in-law's new promotion for 10 straight minutes and asked me, almost as an afterthought, how my little bookkeeping sin job was going. I did not know disappointment could grow inside someone you love and still somehow not belong to you. I did not know it could sit at your kitchen table eating cereal, swinging its legs calling you Aunt Renee, while your entire family quietly built a plan around making that not true anymore. My husband's name is Derek. We've been married 6 years. Derek has an older brother, Bryce, who is 38, and has spent his whole life being the kind of person rooms rearrange themselves around. Bryce sells commercial real estate in Charlotte, truck he definitely can't afford, and has a laugh that makes strangers laugh along with him, before they even know the joke. When Bryce dropped out of his MBA program, my mother-in-law said the program wasn't a good cultural fit. When Bryce totaled his fiance's Jeep at 26, my father-in-law said accidents happen to good drivers too. When Bryce's first marriage fell apart, because he wouldn't stop disappearing on weekend work trips, everyone agreed. His ex-wife had been controlling. Derek, on the other hand, got handed responsibility the way other families hand out chores. Derek paid off his parents' roof repair 2 years ago and nobody mentioned it at dinner once. I learned early that in the Whitfield family there were two categories of people. The ones who got forgiven before they apologized, and the ones who got reminded. I met Derek when I was 25, working as a bookkeeper for a regional dental supply company in Greensboro, North Carolina. He was steady in a way that felt like relief after years of dating men who treated stability like a personality flaw. Derek noticed things. He remembered I liked my coffee with oat milk before I'd said it twice. He fixed the wobble in our kitchen table without being asked. When I told him about how my own family treated my older sister like a saint, no matter what she did, he said, "So you're the responsible one who gets nothing for it." I remember thinking, finally, someone who sees the pattern. I should have paid closer attention to how well he understood that dynamic. He'd been living inside one his whole life too. We got married in a small ceremony outside Asheville. Bryce gave a toast that was somehow both a compliment and a public roast. "Derek's the reliable one," he said, raising his glass. "Took him long enough to find someone who could put up with how boring that is." Everyone laughed. I smiled the way you smile when you've already decided not to make a scene. Derek squeezed my hand under the table and said quietly, "Ignore him." I did. For years, honestly, I did. The first few years of our marriage were good. Not flawless, but good. We argued about normal things. How often his family expected us at Sunday dinner, how much overtime I picked up at the office, whether we could afford the house we eventually bought in Matthews, just outside Charlotte. Then about 3 years in, Bryce got engaged to a woman named Sienna, a nurse he'd met at urgent care after spraining his ankle playing pickup basketball. Sienna seemed sweet, a little overwhelmed by how loud the Whitfields could get at family dinners, but kind. I liked her instantly. I felt sorry for her too, in a way I couldn't fully explain yet. About a year after their wedding, Sienna and Bryce started trying for a baby. It didn't happen right away, and Sienna leaned on our family a lot. During that stretch, calling my mother-in-law for advice. Stopping by fireplace sometimes just to talk because Bryce worked long hours and traveled for client dinners that always seemed to run past midnight. I didn't think much of it at first. Derek would go over and help her with things around the house when Bryce was out of town. Replacing a garbage disposal. Starting her car. Sitting with her on the porch when she was anxious about another failed cycle. I thought it was sweet that my husband cared about his sister-in-law that way. I thought it said something good about him. Looking back, I think it said something about both of them that I simply refused to see. The calls started getting longer. Derek began taking them in the garage, which struck me as odd, because nobody chooses a cold concrete garage over a warm kitchen. Unless they're hiding something or punishing themselves. He started going to the gym 4 nights a week instead of 2. Even though his body didn't change much. He bought a new cologne and told me it was a gift from a co-worker's white elephant exchange. Which was a strange enough explanation that I actually laughed when he said it. I noticed the receipts. I noticed the late nights. I noticed Bryce's sudden, suspicious generosity towards Sienna easing up. Right around the same time Derek's garage calls started. Noticing something and admitting what it means, though, are two completely different muscles. And I hadn't built the second one yet. Sienna told us she was pregnant on a Sunday afternoon at my in-laws' house. She'd asked everyone to come over for what she called a small announcement. And the second she walked in, holding a little wrapped box, my mother-in-law started crying before anyone even opened it. Inside was a onesie that said "worth the wait." Bryce stood beside her beaming, soaking up congratulations like a man accepting an award he hadn't actually earned. I looked at Derek. He was smiling too, but it didn't reach all the way up. For half a second, before he caught himself, something crossed his face that looked less like joy, and more like dread. I told myself it was nothing. Married people get complicated faces sometimes. I wanted to believe that so badly I almost managed it. Over the following weeks, my mother-in-law became strangely protective of Sienna, more than even a doting grandmother-to-be should be. If I mentioned Sienna seemed tired, my mother-in-law said, "Don't pry, Renee, let her rest." If I suggested Bryce go with her to an appointment instead of working late again, she said, "Bryce provides for that family, let the man breathe." If anyone joked about the baby having Bryce's stubborn chin, Derek would get unusually quiet, and my mother-in-law would change the subject so fast it gave me whiplash. One night at dinner, I said offhandedly, "I hope the baby gets Sienna's patience and not Bryce's temper." Derek choked on his water. Sienna excused herself to the bathroom. My mother-in-law said, "Pregnancy makes you sensitive to everything, even jokes." I remember thinking, that wasn't sensitivity. That was guilt. But I still didn't let myself follow the thought all the way to the end. I kept giving people room to come clean on their own. I didn't understand yet that liars don't use that room to confess. They use it to build alibis. The receipt turned up on a Thursday in March. Derek's gym bag had been sitting in the trunk of my car for 2 days, because his check engine light had come on and we'd swapped vehicles. And I was digging through it, for his phone charger, when a folded paper slid out from the side pocket. Marriott property, off Route 9, about 40 minutes outside the city. 1 king room. Paid to a card ending in the same 4 digits as Derek's. Date, 6 weeks before Sienna announced her pregnancy. I sat down on the edge of our bed and stared at that number until the room actually tilted a little. My hands didn't shake right away, which surprised me, because I always assumed something like that would hit you like an electric shock. It didn't. It felt slow, like the air in the house had been leaking out for months. And I was only now noticing the house had gone cold. I called the hotel that afternoon, keeping my voice level, telling the front desk I was confirming an expense report for my husband's employer. The woman couldn't tell me much, hotel policy and all that, but when I asked, almost as an afterthought, was the room booked for 2? She paused just slightly too long before saying, "I'm not able to disclose guest details, ma'am." That pause told me everything her job wouldn't let her say out loud. I waited until Derek got home that night. He walked in carrying takeout, talking about how the new barbecue place downtown had jacked up their prices, as if our whole life hadn't just rearranged itself in his absence. I set the receipt on the kitchen island. He stopped mid-sentence. The bag of food slipped slightly in his grip. "What's this?" I asked. His face did something I've never forgotten. A kind of collapse he tried to catch and couldn't quite manage. "Renee, don't say my name like that. Just tell me what it is." He set the food down very carefully, like he needed his hands to be doing something controlled. "That motel was for a work thing. A client retreat." "Then why was it in your gym bag, paid on your card, with no client name anywhere on it?" "I don't remember the details, it was months ago." "You don't remember?" "No." I laughed once, and it didn't sound like a sound I recognized coming out of my own mouth. "Derek, I'm going to ask you exactly one time. Why does this receipt have a date 6 weeks before Sienna found out she was pregnant?" He didn't answer. He just looked at the floor like it might open up and take him somewhere else. That silence told me more than any sentence could have. "How long?" I said. Not even a question anymore, just a demand. He covered his face with both hands. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I closed my eyes. I think that exact sentence should be legally retired. Nobody ever says it wasn't supposed to happen about something they're proud of. "More than once?" I asked. He didn't say anything, which was, by then, becoming its own kind of confession. Walked into the living room because I needed distance. Not from him exactly, but from the version of myself that might say something I couldn't take back. He followed, talking fast now, the way people talk when they're trying to outrun the truth instead of explain it. He said, "It started after Bryce had been gone for 2 weeks straight on a work trip, and Sienna had called him crying, scared about another failed cycle, feeling invisible in her own marriage. He said he just wanted to comfort her. He said it turned into something neither of them planned. He said Sienna told him their marriage had been dead for over a year. That Bryce barely touched her. That she felt like a placeholder in her own house." Each sentence landed like another stone dropped straight into my chest. My husband had spent 6 years being the responsible one, the steady one, And the entire time he'd been quietly becoming exactly the kind of man his brother always was, just better at hiding it. I asked the only question that actually mattered. Is the baby yours? Derek went very still. Not hesitant, frozen, the way a person freezes when the floor under them disappears. I don't know, he whispered. 3 words. Those 3 words ended my marriage more completely than the affair itself ever could have. I grabbed my keys off the counter. He stepped in front of the door. Renee, please, don't leave like this. I can't be in this house right now. I wanted to tell you. When? Before the baby's born? After? While I'm holding him at the hospital pretending to be his aunt. His face crumpled in a way I didn't expect. Your mother-in-law already knows. I went completely still. What? He looked like he wished he could swallow the sentence back down. My mom found out. About a month ago. The room felt like it tilted again, harder this time. She's known for a month? He nodded, not meeting my eyes. What did she say? When she found out? He swallowed. She said we shouldn't tell you yet. Not until we knew if the baby was mine. She said, if it turns out to be Bryce's, there's no reason to blow everything up over nothing. And if it turns out to be yours. He didn't answer that part, which was its own answer. My mother-in-law had known for a month that my husband might have fathered his brother's baby. And she had sat across from me at Sunday dinner asking whether I thought the nursery should be gray or sage green. That night I slept in a Hampton Inn off the interstate. Because our bedroom suddenly felt like a crime scene I didn't want to be a witness inside. I barely slept. Around 2 in the morning, Bryce texted me out of nowhere. Heard you and Derek had a blow-up. Whatever's going on, don't do anything you'll regret. I stared at that message until the letters blurred, then typed back, your wife slept with my husband. The typing bubble appeared 3 separate times before he finally wrote, it's complicated. I laughed so hard alone in that hotel room that I scared myself a little. Complicated. That's the word men like Bryce reach for. When the truth is simple, and they just don't want to say it out loud. The next morning I drove straight to my in-laws' house. My mother-in-law, Carol, opened the door already pale, which told me Derek had called ahead. My father-in-law, Walter, stood behind her in the hallway with his arms crossed. Bryce's truck was in the driveway. Of course it was. The golden sun had run home to the family compound. The second things got uncomfortable. I walked past Carol without a hug. Bryce was in the kitchen, drinking coffee out of his father's old University of North Carolina mug, like it was any other Saturday. I looked at him and said, get up. Carol gasped, Rennie, please, let's not do this here. I turned on her. You knew, her mouth trembled. Rennie, sit down, let's talk like adults. I don't want to sit down. I looked at Bryce again. How long has Sienna been with my husband? He set the mug down slowly. Rennie, you need to calm down. How long, Bryce? He sighed like I was the unreasonable one in the room. It wasn't some ongoing thing, all right? It happened a couple times when things were rough between us. Carol jumped in. Bryce made a mistake. But he's been under so much stress since at work. A mistake? I repeated. He's sorry, Renee. Bryce didn't look sorry. He looked irritated that the consequences had shown up before he'd finished his coffee. Walter cleared his throat. This is painful for everyone involved. No, Walter, it's painful for me. It's just inconvenient for everyone else. Then Carol said the sentence that told me exactly which side she'd already chosen, days before I ever walked through that door. Rennie, whatever happened between the boys, Sienna is pregnant. That child needs stability. I stared at her. Whose baby is it? Nobody answered. I looked straight at Derek, who'd come down the hallway and was hovering near the staircase like he wanted to disappear into the drywall. Is it Bryce's? He looked away. Walter cleared his throat again. We don't know that for certain. We don't know that, I repeated slowly. Funny how blood mattered so much when Bryce needed forgiveness, and suddenly it doesn't matter at all when it's inconvenient. Carol stepped toward me. Biology isn't everything, Renee. There it was. The family motto, rewritten in real time to cover for betrayal. Biology mattered when Walter needed Bryce to inherit the family's rental properties someday. Biology mattered when Carol bragged about the Whitfield jawline at every holiday photo, but the second it might mean Derek had to actually own what he'd done, biology suddenly became negotiable. You want me to think this is about the baby, I said. It's not. It's about protecting Bryce from ever having to be a father to a child he might have actually fathered. Carol started crying. I want you to think about that innocent child. No. You want me to think about anyone except the 2 people who actually did this. Bryce stood up from the table. You always do this, make everything a performance. I turned to him. You slept with my husband's brother's wife. Wait, no. You slept with your own brother's wife. And I'm the one performing? His face went red. She came to him because things with us were already falling apart, all right? Don't act like you're so perfect, Renee. You work 60 hours a week and barely look up from your laptop. Maybe Derek needed someone who actually paid attention. That one landed harder than I expected, the way good lies always do, because there was a half-truth buried inside it. I had worked a lot. I had been distracted some nights. But I had never once touched his life and called it complicated. Carol stepped between us. Enough. This family cannot survive both of you tearing each other apart. This family survived because I kept absorbing whatever Bryce did. I said. That's the only reason it ever looked fine from the outside. I left before I said something I couldn't walk back. The next 2 weeks were lawyers, paperwork and a kind of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. I found an attorney, named Vivian Cho. Recommended by a coworker. Who'd gone through her own ugly divorce, 2 years earlier. Vivian had the unreadable calm of someone who'd watched hundreds of people discover that love and legal liability live in completely different rooms. Don't sign anything. She told me at our first meeting. Don't agree to any informal arrangement verbally, especially about custody or finances, until paternity is settled. Can I push for a DNA test? I asked. You can't force Sienna, but if she or Bryce wants any kind of financial or emotional claim acknowledged by this family, that question is going to have to get answered eventually anyway. She paused. From what you've told me, it sounds like it might answer itself faster than you think. It did. Sienna actually reached out to me first. Of all people, 2 days later. She asked to meet at a coffee shop near her house, somewhere neutral. I almost said no. Then I thought about Vivian's advice about closure being useful as long as I kept my wallet and my heart in separate pockets. And I went. Sienna looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of the easy warmth she usually carried. I never meant to hurt you, she said, turning her cup in slow circles. That doesn't really help me. I know. She stopped. Derek made me feel like someone actually saw me. Bryce stopped seeing me a long time before any of this happened. And you believed that was an answer instead of a conversation you should have had with your own husband. She nodded slowly, eyes filling. I agreed to a non-invasive prenatal paternity test last week. I wanted to know too, Renee. Not just for you. For me. The results came back 9 days later. Vivian called me into her office, and I knew from her face, before she said a single word. She slid the paper across the desk. I read the percentage twice to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Probability of paternity for Derek Whitfield. 0.00%. The baby was Bryce's. I sat there staring at that number for what felt like a long time. I thought it would crush me. Instead, something strange happened. It cleared the fog completely. For weeks I'd been trapped in maybe. Maybe the baby was Derek's. Maybe our marriage could survive this somehow. Maybe my in-laws were just panicking, and not actually choosing sides. 0.00% doesn't leave room for maybe. It has a clean, almost merciful cruelty to it. It closes every door at once so you stop wasting energy checking each one. I drove home, sat in my driveway, and let myself cry quietly. For the first time since all of it started. Then I wiped my face, walked inside, and started making copies of everything. The hotel receipt, the DNA results, screenshots. Sienna had sent me of Bryce's old messages bragging about stress relief on his work trips, and one text from Carol to Derek that turned my stomach more than anything else in the whole pile. Don't tell Renee anything until we have a plan together as a family. She's too emotional right now to think clearly. Once the baby's here and everyone calms down, this will settle itself. Too emotional. Carol had mistaken my right to know the truth for a mood she needed to manage. 2 days later she organized what she called a family dinner to discuss how we move forward together. Not me, the family. I almost didn't go. Then my Aunt Roberta called. My mother's sister. The only person in either side of this family who seemed to have kept her spine through all of it. She said, Carol's been telling people you abandoned your husband during a hard time. I closed my eyes. Of course she has. Roberta said I'm coming with you Sunday if you want me there. I told her, yes. So on Sunday I walked into my in-laws' house with a folder under my arm. Same dining room, same framed family photos on the wall, same smell of pot roast covering up months of denial. Sienna sat near the window, pale hands folded in her lap. Bryce leaned against the kitchen counter with his arms crossed, already defensive before anyone had said a word. Derek sat at the far end of the table, looking like a man waiting for a verdict he already knew. Carol fluttered around refilling water glasses nobody had asked for. Walter stood near the fireplace. My Aunt Roberta sat beside me, and a cousin named Pierce, who Carol had clearly invited as an emotional witness, hoping a bigger audience might pressure me into staying quiet. Carol started before I'd even sat all the way down. Renee, thank you for coming. I know this has been an incredibly difficult season for everyone. A difficult season. Like a bad stretch of weather, I set the folder on the table. Carol looked at it and swallowed hard. Sienna looked down at her hands. Bryce smirked, just slightly, and that smirk is honestly what gave me the last bit of nerve I needed. Does everyone here actually know why Derek and I separated? I asked, looking around the table. Pierce shifted uncomfortably. We just heard there were problems. Bryce said, Renee's having a hard time accepting that marriages go through rough patches. I almost laughed. Rough patches. That's one way to phrase it. Walter said, this isn't the moment to start attacking people. No, Walter, this is exactly the moment. I opened the folder. I placed the hotel receipt down first. This is the receipt I found in Derek's gym bag. A motel room, paid for by Derek, 6 weeks before Sienna announced her pregnancy. Then I set down a printed copy of Sienna's written admission. The one she'd given me herself, almost like she wanted it on record. Roberta closed her eyes for a second. Like she'd known and still hated hearing it confirmed out loud. Bryce pushed off the counter. "You're seriously doing this in front of everyone?" I looked at him. "You did this. I just brought paper." Then, I placed the DNA results in the center of the table, face up. "And this is the paternity test. Derek is not the father." Nobody moved for what felt like a full minute. Carol started crying. Bryce's face went completely blank, the practiced charm gone for once. Derek stared at the table like it had opened up beneath him. Pierce whispered, "Jesus." Walter picked up the paper, read it, and set it back down like it had burned his fingers. I looked at Bryce. "Congratulations, it's yours." He snapped back to life fast. "You don't know that for sure. Those tests aren't always accurate." I pulled out the second document Vivian had prepared exactly for this moment. Accredited lab. Full chain of custody. Confirmed by Sienna's own OB. "But if you'd like another test after the baby's born, I'm sure my lawyer would be thrilled to arrange one." Bryce shut his mouth. Carol sobbed, "Renee, please, not like this, not in front of the whole family." I turned to her. "You're the one who invited the whole family." I wanted support. "No. You wanted an audience that would pressure me into staying quiet." Walter said, "This is still a private family matter." I almost laughed at that. It stopped being private the moment Carol started telling people I abandoned my husband during a hard time. Roberta finally spoke. "Carol, you weren't protecting that baby, you were protecting Bryce." The room went still in a different way. Carol looked at her like she'd been slapped. Bryce snapped, "Stay out of this, Roberta." Roberta stood up. "You slept with your brother's wife. You don't get to assign seating at this table anymore." That almost made me smile. Almost. Walter rubbed his forehead. "Renee, what is it you actually want?" I looked at him. That's the first decent question anyone in this family has asked me since this started. I let the silence sit for a FS before I answered. "I want a divorce. I want my name nowhere near that birth certificate. I want all communication from Sienna routed through lawyers, unless it's absolutely necessary. I want Bryce to stop pretending he's the wounded party here. I want Carol to stop rewriting what actually happened. And I want this family to understand I am not standing in as an aunt who quietly becomes a stepmother just so nobody has to say Bryce's name out loud." Carol whispered, "But that baby is innocent." "Yes," I said, "he is. Which is exactly why he deserves the truth from the very beginning. Not a fake aunt playing pretend, not a fractured marriage held together with duct tape, not a whole family too scared to say his real father's name." Sienna started crying openly. "I'm sorry, Renee, I believe you," I said. Her eyes lifted slightly, like that surprised her. "But sorry doesn't rebuild what you decided to tear down." Bryce muttered, "You're enjoying this a little too much." I turned to him. "No, that's the difference between us. You enjoyed taking something that wasn't yours. I'm not enjoying any of this. I'm just done protecting people who never once protected me." That landed. "Good." Carol put both hands flat on the table. "Renee, if you walk away from this family, that baby grows up without an aunt who actually loves him." I looked at Bryce. Then, maybe his father should grow up instead. Bryce said nothing. Walter's jaw tightened. "Don't make us choose between our sons." I picked up the folder. "You already did. Months ago. I'm just the last one finding out." I walked out while Carol called my name behind me. I didn't stop. The fallout came fast. Sienna's own mother called me a week later and apologized, said she'd believed Carol's version of events and felt sick once she learned the truth. Roberta sent one text that I saved. "Proud of you. That was awful, but you stood up straight the whole time." Derek moved into a furnished corporate apartment near his office and texted me twice, asking if we could talk things through. I didn't respond either time. The divorce process itself was quieter than I expected. Almost anticlimactic after everything that led up to it. Derek didn't fight me on the house. I think part of him already understood. There was nothing left worth fighting for. A month later, Derek asked to meet at a diner near my new apartment. I almost said no. Then I decided closure was worth 1 hour of my time, if I kept my expectations low enough. He looked different, smaller somehow, the easy confidence gone. "Bryce barely talks to me anymore," he said, stirring coffee he hadn't put anything into. "Says I'd made things complicated by telling Carol before he was ready." "I'm shocked," I said. He flinched. "I deserve that." "No. You deserve honesty. Sarcasm is just what I have left on short notice." He nodded, looked down at the table. "I am sorry, Renee. Not just that it fell apart. That I lied. That I let myself believe Sienna seeing me meant more than the truth did. It was the first real apology. No excuses about being tired or overworked, or misunderstood. Just plain ownership. I appreciated it. It still didn't make me want him back. I hope you figure out how to actually be honest with someone someday." I told him. "Just not with me." His face crumpled slightly, but he nodded. 2 months later, Sienna had the baby. A boy she named Theodore. She messaged me a single line through Roberta. who'd somehow stays the close with both of us through the wreckage. He's healthy, thought you should know. I stared at the photo attached for a long time. Tiny, red-faced, wrapped in a striped hospital blanket. Completely innocent of every single thing the adults around him had done. I didn't hate that baby. I never could. I hated the elaborate lie they'd all tried to build a life around him. Carol sent me a photo of Theodore a week after that, captioned, "Look at this face. And tell me you feel nothing." I wrote back, "I feel sad that every adult around him failed him before he could even hold his own head up. That doesn't make me his mother." Then I blocked the number. Bryce posted some vague, self-pitying caption online a few weeks later about people who walk away the second life gets complicated. For once, I didn't respond. Roberta did, in the comments, with one line. "Some people confuse complicated with consequences." The post came down within the hour. Walter showed up at my new apartment, about 4 months after the divorce was finalized. I almost didn't open the door. He looked older than I remembered, like the last few months had taken something out of him he wasn't getting back. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stood in the doorway. "Bryce isn't here, so I guess you can actually say what you mean." He winced, then said, "Carol and I are living apart right now." That surprised me. I didn't say anything. "She still believes if everyone just sits down together this gets fixed," he went on. "Does it?" He looked at the ground. "I don't know anymore." It was probably the most honest sentence I'd ever heard him say. "I failed you," he said next. "I spent so long protecting Bryce that I taught him there'd always be someone else around to clean up after him. And somewhere along the way, Derek learned that lesson too. Just quieter." "Yes," I said. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, Renee." "I believe you," I said. He looked up hopeful for half a second. "But I don't trust you. Not yet, maybe not ever." He accepted that without arguing, which somehow mattered more than anything he'd said before it. Carol never accepted it the same way. She sent letters for months, an old necklace I'd given her one Christmas. Photos of Derek as a baby, as if reminding me he'd once been small and harmless, might undo what he'd done as a grown man. I returned every package unopened, not out of cruelty, but because I needed to stop letting that family decide what I owed them. I started therapy not long after, mostly because Aunt Roberta basically dragged me to the first appointment herself. I moved into a smaller place that actually felt like mine. I picked up running, badly, mostly to have somewhere to put all the anger that used to live in my chest like a second heartbeat. The first time someone new asked me, on an early date about a year later, what my family was like, I gave him the short version. He sat back, blinked and said, "That's not really a family tree. That's a crime scene with a Christmas card." I laughed for what felt like the first time in months. Sometimes I still think about Theodore. I wonder what he'll be told when he's old enough to ask real questions. I wonder if Bryce will ever actually become the father everyone insisted he had to be. Or if he'll keep treating fatherhood the same way he's treated everything else his whole life, as someone else's responsibility to manage. I hope Sienna tells him the truth early and plainly, because children can feel the shape of a lie in a house long before they ever learn the words for it. So if anyone wants to ask whether I was wrong for refusing to raise my husband's brother's baby, just because everyone insisted it was the kind thing to do, here's my answer. That child was innocent. He still is, but his innocence was never my responsibility to carry. My family wanted me to believe that baby needed me to disappear into a role nobody actually offered me honestly. What he really needed was a family willing to stop lying, to protect the person who caused all of it in the first place. I was done being the person everyone in that family used to clean up messes they refused to even name out loud.